Are you one of these individuals that has these constant and almost intrusive thoughts that are entirely focused around food? It might sound like, what are we having next? When are we having it? Where are we having it? Are we going to have chocolate? I would really like to have chocolate. Chocolate would be really good right now. Chocolate would be amazing. Oh my God. And so on and so forth for the entire day. Well, we don't have an exact medical definition as to what this kind of thought process and chatter is, but the media and my number of patients that I've worked with collectively call it food noise. And obviously, if you have this constant rumination and intrusive thought process that is focused on food and wanting to get more food, well, managing your weight is probably going to be pretty darn challenging. Now, the reason we don't have a very good or, well, any kind of medical definition for what food noise is because we don't exactly know what is happening. What we do know is that this food noise or chatter seems to be more prevalent in individuals that are actively dieting, as well as individuals that are living in larger bodies. And what we likely think is going on is that there is some component of cravings and wanting of food and how it's kind of interacting with our appetite regulatory system and that sort of thing. So the way that I kind of describe it to the patients and individuals that I work with is, well, how I describe our appetite system in general. And so when it comes to the appetite system, which is located within your brain, I like to kind of think about the brain in two parts. We have our primal brain and we have our modern brain. Within your primal brain is where you develop your wanting and cravings for food, because this is the part of your brain that is working subconsciously without you having any input whatsoever. It is monitoring your internal and external environment and essentially trying to figure out what's going to be the thing that kills you in the next 5 minutes. And so if this part of your brain detects that, hey, we need some nourishment, we need some protein or what have you, it is going to then start generating the signals to create this wanting and craving for food to get you to get up off your butt and to go find food. A couple of problems with your primal brain is that over the entire course of your life, it has learned what is the most efficient and the most rewarding way to solve the various problems that you come across on a daily basis. So to give you a bit of an example, it has learned that yes, an apple can be nutritious and provide it some nutrients, but so can apple pie. And well, apple pie is apple effing pie. The other problem with that primal brain is that, like I said, it's very focused on keeping you alive in the next 5 minutes. So it's very focused on the present, and it really doesn't care what eating apple pie every day would do to your health in the next 10 years. So your primal brain detects that the body needs some nourishment, it creates that signal, it creates this wave of wanting, if you will, and then it sends this signal up to your modern brain and hopefully gets your modern brain to act upon it to go and find food. And within your modern brain, you have two components. You have your system 1 modern brain and you have your system 2 modern brain. Your system 1 modern brain is where very fast, intuitive, gut type feeling thoughts will occur. It's actually with this intuitive and very fast thinking part of your brain that a majority of your decisions are made. But what we know with your system 1, your fast thinking part of your brain, is that when it receives that signal, that craving and that wanting coming from that primal brain, it starts to generate what are called permission thoughts. And so permission thoughts are going to sound like you're at the end of your day, you've had a very long day at work, you're tired, you're exhausted, and you start to have the thought of, you know what, I deserve to have that piece of chocolate. Or it'll say, you know what, we can have this piece of chocolate now, and then tomorrow we won't have any chocolate whatsoever. Or we'll go to the gym and we'll work it off. Basically, it's going to create the thoughts that give you permission to have the piece of chocolate or to have whatever it is that you're craving and wanting. Now, this is where your system 2 part of the modern brain comes in, and it's this part of your brain that is your slow, logical, processing, goal-setting part of your brain that can actually think and say, hey, you know what? Having apple pie every day probably isn't going to be good for our health and ultimately help me to get to the goals that I'm trying to get to when managing my health and my weight. And so in some instances, obviously not all the time, your system 2 part of the modern brain is going to be able to check those permission thoughts and say, nah, those are incorrect. I don't actually want a piece of chocolate. I don't actually want to go and work this off at the gym tomorrow. We're just going to actually have that apple and be on our way. Now, where I think this food noise aspect of things starts to come from is where your system 1 and your system 2 kind of get caught in this loop of chatting back and forth. System 1 keeps getting this signal from that primal brain of wanting and craving certain foods, and it keeps saying, what are we going to have next? When are we going to eat? Let's go get chocolate. Chocolate would be delicious. And it's quickly running off and trying to get this chatter and getting you to go and find those said foods. Then your system 2 is trying to kick in and say, no, I don't want to have the chocolate, or I need to go to the gym today, or I need to do X, Y, and Z, and is able to logically think through and try to counteract those permission thoughts and those thoughts that are coming from that system 1. And I don't know about you, but this sounds effing exhausting. And so if you're somebody that has struggled with their weight, you have probably experienced this where your system 2 can keep it up for a while. Maybe it's on the Monday when you first start a new diet. Maybe it's usually earlier in the day where things are going well and you feel like you have lots of energy, also some distractions by working and stuff like that. But as the day wears on and as the week wears on, where you get more and more tired, you've restricted and restrained yourself, and those cravings just keep getting higher and higher and higher, all of a sudden that food noise is going to get louder and louder and louder until you finally cave and you go and have that piece of chocolate. So that is kind of a simplified way to think about what is happening in terms of the food noise, what is the process that's going on inside of your brain. And so let's kind of talk about not only some of the things that can affect it and maybe make it worse, but also how can we maybe start to manage that food noise. And hey, if you got some value out of this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below as well. Like and share the video and give it to other people that might get some benefit from it. And of course, drop your questions down in the comments below. I will do my best to get around to all of them. And also check me out on my other channels at The Official Dr. Dan, and check out my Amazon links down below where I suggest a variety of products to my patients and clients in order to help them manage their weight and continue along their weight loss journey. So the things that are going to ultimately worsen this food noise are going to be things like increased stress, a lack of sleep, not getting enough protein and proper nutrients, being too restrictive with food, so really trying to hold yourself back from having that chocolate. And I mean, what ultimately is going to happen there is, well, if I tell you not to think about the purple elephant, what are you ultimately going to think about? The same thing is going to happen with chocolate. As well, eating processed foods that have been ultimately engineered and designed to get you to eat as much of them as possible, they're also going to worsen your food noise. Now, before I get too far here, I do want to mention that some food noise is actually a good thing. You see, having some craving, some drive and rumination to go and find food, especially 30,000 years ago when food was quite scarce, does serve an important role in telling you that, hey, we need food, we need nourishment, and you need to give it to us so that we can keep living. So what can we do in order to manage this food noise? So some of the big things that we initially need to look at are going to be things like managing your stress, getting a good night's sleep, trying to increase your activity level, not being too restrictive and actually allowing yourself to have some chocolate now and then. From a nutrition perspective, there are 4 things that I always talk to people about using. And these 4 things are going to be things like eating more protein, trying to eat more consistently over the course of the day to give your body pulses of protein over the day because your body isn't very good at storing protein. The third thing is eating enough or eating a reasonable amount of calories so it doesn't result in you binging on the weekends and stuff like that. We need to eat an amount of calories that we can actually sustain into the long term, not just Monday to Thursday, but Monday to Sunday. And then finally, we need to make sure that we're getting enough fiber. Fiber from fruits and veggies is obviously very good for your health, but it also helps to create volume in your diet and helps with you to get enough micronutrients and good solid nutrition to keep your body and your brain happy. Now, a big thing I want to highlight with the above here is that you can't just start doing this for one day and expect that food noise to disappear. You literally have 30,000 years of biology that is very, very smart and very, very aware that, hey, This individual sometimes gives me enough nourishment, but a majority of the time they don't. So I'm not going to get too excited when they start eating properly just for one day. I'm going to need to see a consistent pattern happening, which could be weeks, it could be months before that food noise fully gets calmed down and that biological system can feel like it is actually safe and there is plenty of food in the environment. Now, the other thing that we can look at is utilizing medications. There has been a ton of people that I've worked with who have said medications have been life-changing in a lot of ways because they've taken away this food noise, which is awesome. That is fantastic, because without that food noise being there and having that almost decrease in anxiety, if you will allow you to be able to better look and focus on all the other aspects and components of your health and your life, and allow you to develop some really good sustainable habits that you can maintain for the long term. And the reason why I say we need to work on all of those other things despite the medications is because that food noise can return even if you're on the medication. You see, one way to kind of think about it is that usually that signal, that wave of wanting and craving that's coming from your primal brain is kind of like a wave on the ocean. It flows along the ocean and usually hits the shoreline, does it what it wants, gets you to go and eat all the food, etc. When we take a medication, what we're effectively doing is we put up a wall. So that wave hits the wall, bounces off of it, signal doesn't get through, you don't get that craving, wanting for food. Ultimately, you eat less food, get into a calorie deficit, and lose weight. I know, sounds pretty great, right? But if you are not taking care of that biological side of things, if we're not getting enough nourishment, if we're not dealing with the stressors in life, if we're being too restrictive, what's ultimately going to happen is that signal or that wave from that primal brain is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until finally it crashes over that wall that has been created by the medication. And it doesn't matter how much medication we are pumping in, eventually it will crash over because biology is always going to win. And if it feels that it needs to get you to eat food immediately or you're going to die, it's going to make it happen. So it is vitally important that we still work on everything in the background while we're taking on these medications. That is everything you need to know about food noise, how we can manage it, how we can make changes in our life to ultimately calm it down, as well how medications can definitely play a role to make it a bit easier to manage and move on with life and to be able to do the good things that we need to do to manage our weight and our overall health. The real ins and the outs of what is causing the food noise, we don't exactly know. However, I did think I gave you a pretty good example of how it's an interaction between that primal brain and the modern brain and kind of that constant chatter and movement between system 1 and system 2 of that modern brain. As well, I do want to highlight that it's going to be variable person to person. The severity and how long or how often that food noise is happening is really going to be very independent because there is likely some genetic and environmental factors that are going to play a role. But overall, we can learn to manage it. The big things that we need to look at are managing our lifestyle as well. We might add on the medications to help you make the changes that are necessary. That is it, and that is all, you beautiful people. As always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. As well, check me out on my other channels at The Official Dr. Dan. Check out my Amazon links down below where you can find the products that I recommend to people to help them to manage their weight. As well, if you want to book a consultation with myself, either here if you're living in Alberta, you can check out Apothecare Pharmacy in Calgary, Alberta, or if you are outside of the Alberta area, definitely check out the link where you can book a consultation with myself where I do online coaching for people and helping them to manage their weight. And until next week, always remember that small tweaks lead to massive peaks.